1948, I want to say, until about 1969, there was a separate grouping of Georgia high school football in the state of Georgia. It was called the Georgia Interscholastic Association. And those were the predominantly African American schools that were around. They had their own separate schedules, their own separate titles, and for the longest time, they weren't recognized as official state titles in the state of Georgia. It took convincing the executive director of the Georgia High School Association at the time, Dr. Ralph Swearingen. It was a campaign basically that there was this lost generation of high school football teams that deserved to be recognized as state champs just as much as everyone else. And one example, when I was writing my first book, I went down to Kingsland, which is basically Jacksonville, Florida. It's Camden County. It's the county just above Jacksonville. It's about as southeast as you can get in the state of Georgia. And when I was assembling all of my work about Camden County, they would mention Ralph Bunch High. And they said, yeah, we already won state titles back in 1960 with Bunch High. And it hadn't been recognized. And so it took an effort in the late 90s and early 2000s to get the GIA champs recognized as official champs. You have the legend of Lemon Street up where Marietta High currently plays their football games up at Northcutt Stadium. And Lemon Street ran the table when it came to high school football championships. Booker T. Washington High School here in downtown Atlanta, here within the Atlanta city limits, a storied history when it comes to their high school football. And you had Dasher and Houston County and Tift County Industrial and all of these different places that weren't recognized until the GIA was recognized, first off by this project that the Georgia High School Football Historical Association did. And then they went to the GHSA and said, hey, look, here's a part of our history that hasn't been recognized. We need to do that. And that's what ended up happening. And so if you go on any database, you'll see that there are GIA champs, as many as 4 separate classifications in any given year. And then you have the GHSA champs that are on an equal footing with the GIA. And I thought that was something that was...
We didn't, like I say, we didn't have people of color in my high school. Not that they were excluded, they just weren't in the district. I mean, it was you cut a hunk of land out and say this is where the school is from, and they didn't draw any funny lines. It was just the whole city, and didn't exist. So, didn't have that experience other than some tournament play, and I never had any issues. Then got to college, and it was about an equally mixed team of people of color and white on the basketball team. The football team was about 80% white. A lot of what I call corn-fed Midwestern boys. And an experience with this particular individual of color who had been the subject of this whole thing after football season, starting basketball. And I'd been jerked from the team, so I wasn't as close to him as I could have been. But we ended up, as a foursome of guys, going down to the pizza place to get some pizza. And one of the, what I'll call local rednecks in town, Indiana has rednecks too, kind of made a comment, and I said, well, that's fine, just cancel the order. And he kind of looked at me, and I said, we don't need to spend our money here. And the other 3 guys kind of looked at me shocked, and I said, I know a better pizza place, it's just a little further to walk. 3 tables got up and left with us, because they were friends of mine from campus and things like that. And that particular individual wasn't working there the next week. Now, the fact that I may have talked to the owner after the fact may have had something to do with it. But there were no laws or anything to tell people how to act. You just had to act right.
And he kind of, over the last 6 or 8 years of his coaching career, he quit recruiting at the historic black colleges because all the black players who were really good were going to Georgia, Alabama, and other schools that were not receptive to the black athletes during the period he was doing a lot of his scouting. And I haven't checked in the last 2 years, but I think it's 3 years ago, and I may follow up again this year. Not one college player from a historic black college and university was drafted into pro football. They're all graduates now of big name schools and big name conferences. So the integration of the black colleges led to a complete change in the recruiting for pro football. And like I said, as late as 1955, there were teams that did not have a black professional football player. That affected both my life and my brother-in-law and sister's life, that they traveled throughout the South primarily doing his recruiting for pro football players from historic black colleges and universities. It's quite a change now that they don't even recruit there too often anymore for pro football.
I can't say that I lacked the attention, but I also didn't begrudge anybody getting a game ball or being, touted as player of the day, player of the week, player of the year, whatever, or the MVP, and those kinds of things. It comes from team thought rather than individual status. And if you understand that when you sign on to be a team player, you have to throw all that other crap out the door. If you carry that with you, not only are you going to be a little poorer in your performance, it may not take more than a couple of % off your whole game, and that may be enough you won't get bumped by it or be, called out by the coach or whatever, or your other players. The AKA ball hog is what I would use as the analogy so you can relate to it in quick, short terms. I never found, I was, on one occasion, I was the one white guy on the court. And I never found it being 4 guys playing ball and me kind of filling in and moving around and setting a pick here and there, but not really participating. I always felt that I got my hands on the ball just like they did, and I felt like we all pulled together for defense at the other end. It wasn't a matter of, there wasn't any identity politics played there. So I had very good experiences. I guess I was lucky. I don't know how else to describe it other than too much of what is perceived by individuals having trouble with a situation is their perception rather than the reality of the situation. And I'm harping on that a little bit, but I think that's so very true. And here in the bubble, the thing we call Peachtree City and its surroundings, whether you go to Tyrone or Sonoya or South Fayetteville or Sharpsburg and all of this, you've got a bit of isolation that some people come to think is the norm, rather than reaching out a little bit and experiencing a few of the other things. Now,
Atlanta United started their season in San Jose, Costa Rica, because they did really well and they got to play in a hemispheric tournament to see who's the best team in this hemisphere. Just so happened their first match is in San Jose, Costa Rica. And you had about 150 Atlanta United fans who made this trip. First international competition ever. Everything was great. And the security people in this stadium, it was built in the 1950s, seated about 8,000 people, had to carve out a section for Atlanta United fans who would fly down from Atlanta to Costa Rica. It's a 4-hour flight, but nevertheless, to get to Costa Rica, you have to fly over Cuba. You're flying down the coast of Florida, you fly over Cuba, and you're in the Gulf of Mexico and you land in San Jose, Costa Rica. The security forces were a little surprised at just how many people made that trip. So they had to kind of expand their zone a little bit. They had to put up some fencing. They had to have some separation for all of the security people to separate the Atlanta United fans from the fans of the team in Costa Rica. And at halftime, and starting at halftime and all the way through the second half and as the game ended, here at that conclusion, here's what happened. You had Atlanta United fans and the team and the Costa Rican team holding up their scarves. You know how folks can hold up scarves, and that's part of soccer. The Costa Rican fans from Herediano would hold up their scarves, and then they'd go like this. And in soccer, this is the international sign for substitution. So what they wanted to do was basically swap scarves. They wanted to trade scarves with Atlanta United fans. And so you would see Atlanta United fans taking off their Atlanta United scarves, trading with a San Jose CS Herediano fan. You would see it, and there would be this big presentation down beneath both sides of both fan groups. And then, you know, you're anointing the fan, you're anointing the other fan, both sides applaud. So you have basically 500 people with two separate fan bases applauding just a simple swapping of a scarf. And it happened more than once. And then you saw people from the Costa Rican team going like this. I'm going to try to do it without hitting the microphone. So they start going like this, and they're wearing their team's kit. And so you see this and this. So you have Atlanta United fans and Herediano fans now swapping jerseys, which is unheard of. It is unheard of in soccer. Scarves happen every day. Kits, something rare if ever that happens. And then as the game's going, people are applauding. You're still having more and more swapping. And there was a gate that separated Atlanta United fans and Herediano fans as the match is over. First time ever, Atlanta United fans are applauding Costa Rican fans as they're leaving. You know, good game, all that kind of stuff. You have fans tossing their scarves over this fence line, wanting still, as they're going out the door, to swap scarves. You have people throwing their kits around the edge of the fence line to swap out. And security is freaking out. They don't know what is going on. They're like, what is this? To have that kind of inclusion and appreciation, that to me was the biggest microcosm of something about where I'd like to see it continue going. But to go from where we've come from to where we are, there's still a long ways to go in a lot of places around the world, because you'll see stuff in international soccer that will just make your nose curl, and it's disappointing. And you hope that you can get to the point to where everyone around the world in whatever sport you like doesn't have segregation of thought, segregation of fandom, segregation of ideas. And you can appreciate where you are, what you're doing, and what you can do if you're all walking the same journey together. And I think that that's one of the big takeaways in all of this, of what we've seen over the past 75 years. We got a long way to go, but there are steps that have been taken to get us moving in that direction and learning from the past, so we can sit there and say, I'm not like that. I think that's just as important.
My dad's youngest brother who lived with us at the time. I wasn't even in first grade yet. And one of my grandfather was also living with us at the time. But one of my grandfather's card playing buddies, and I used to hang around with that whole crew before I was in school. I was just a little guy, and both mom and dad are working, so I got, my uncle too. But someone had used the N-word around me, and it was about maybe a week later, and my uncle and I are doing something, and I used that word. And he promptly took me over to the sink and washed my mouth out with soap. Now, he wasn't my parent, he was more like my big brother. We were the two that went bowling together and things like that after my grandfather passed away. experience, I can talk about it dead on. Over my life, I probably encountered 4,000 or 5,000 people of color. I would say I can count on, well, like 3 fingers worth, I can count the bad experiences I've had. So with that many people and multiple exposures, it's not like, oh, 5,000 exposures. No, you're talking probably 50, 60,000, 70,000. Every day I would see people that worked with me, I've even worked for. I mean, it's been all of the above. I have no problem, no issue, and I don't see it's that hard to do. And I don't understand why some people try to point to differences rather than similarities. Because it is very easy to grab the fact that I'm blonde. I looked around, none of you are. And so that makes me different. But I don't see that as a plus or a minus. I don't keep score with that sort of thing. And if you are shorter, taller, fatter, skinnier, redhead, blonde, brunette, any ethnicity, speak 1 language or 14, have 5 degrees or no degrees, it comes down to the basic assertion, all people have worth. And if you can't grasp that, then you need to do some looking in the mirror and talking to yourself about the problem, because it's not out there, it's in you. And that's kind of hard for a lot of people to accept, because they don't want to be told that they need to do some work on them. It's not acceptable for me to think, you know, and I'm not the judge either, that's the thing. I just try to evaluate and assess how I'm going to go along with things, because, well,